On Liberty by John Stuart Mill. Chapter 2. Of the Liberty of Thought and Discussion. Second half, pages 33 to 52. Recap of the first half of Chapter 2. We can never be sure that our opinion is correct, so it is wrong to censor other people's opinions. It is possible they have the truth, rather than us. Many famous individuals, like Socrates and Jesus, were persecuted for their convictions. If we allow speech to be censored, we run the risk of censoring those who are most deserving of our attention. Chapter 2, Part 2. Even if we were 100% certain that something was true, it would still be valuable for us to engage with opposing views. But why? Argument 2. The argument from rational development. Mill writes that even if our belief is 100% correct, if it is not fully, frequently, and fearlessly discussed, it will be held as a dead dogma, not a living truth. In other words, if we do not constantly subject our positions to objections and doubts, we will eventually forget why we believed these positions in the first place. We need objections because they allow us to test and strengthen our own beliefs. I believe in God because I agree with Aquinas' cosmological argument. Since every particular thing in the universe has a cause, the world itself must have had a cause. It is impossible that something, the world, could come from nothing. God must exist. The road to a dead dogma. Now that I am convinced of the existence of God, I will not speak or associate with heathen non-believers. 1 year later. I believe in God because I agree with Aquinas' cosmological argument. Since every particular thing in the universe has a cause, the world itself must have had a cause. It is impossible that something, the world, could come from nothing. God must exist. 5 years later. I believe in God because I agree with what Aquinas said about it. Aquinas really knew what he was talking about. I remember loving it. 10 years later. I believe in God because... well, I just know it's true. This is a dead dogma. The road to a living truth. 1 year later. I believe in God because I agree with Aquinas' cosmological argument. Since every particular thing in the universe has a cause, the world itself must have a cause. It is impossible that something, the world, could come from nothing. God must exist. But how do you know that every particular thing in the universe has a cause? Have you seen everything in the universe? I seriously doubt it. That is a good point. I had not thought of that. 2 years later. Three years later. While we can't say for sure that everything was caused by something outside of itself, we can infer from our own experience that events have causes. And our reason tells us that something can't come from nothing. Good point. I will have to think about that and get back to you. Why is it that our ideas are strengthened through debate rather than weakened by it? As we saw in our example, our reasons for believing things are forgotten if they are not frequently challenged. Mill writes that not only the grounds of the opinion are forgotten in the absence of discussion, but too often the meaning of the opinion itself. The words which convey it cease to suggest ideas, or suggest only a small portion of those they were originally employed to communicate. Instead of a vivid conception and a living belief, there remain only a few phrases retained by rote, or, if any part, the shell and husk only of the meaning is retained, the finer essence being lost. According to Mill, knowing only our own side is insufficient justification for believing in something. He who knows only his side of the case knows little of that. His reasons may be good, and no one may have been able to refute them. But if he is equally unable to refute the reasons on the opposite side, he has no ground for preferring either opinion. The rational position for him would be suspension of judgment. How does all this relate to the question of free speech? Freedom of speech is necessary because our mental well-being would deteriorate if speech was not free. Our opinions would rarely be challenged, and so our intellects would gradually weaken. Mill thinks that hearing diverse views is so essential to our intellectual development that we should not only allow diverse opinions, but that we should thank those who provide them. If there are any persons who contest a received opinion, or who will do so if law or opinion will let them, let us thank them for it, open our minds to listen to them, and rejoice. That there is someone to do for us what we otherwise ought, if we have any regard for either the certainty or vitality of our convictions, to do with much greater labor for ourselves. In Chapter 2, Mill advocates persuasively for freedom of speech, arguing that on the one hand we can never be sure that our view is the correct one, and on the other hand that even if opposing positions are incorrect, they are invaluable for our intellectual development. But what about freedom of action? Should our actions be as free as our words? Do the same arguments about speech apply to actions? For the answer, read Chapter 3 of Individuality.